Okay.
Okay, so welcome everyone to the mentorship program final workshop. And I'm presenting on behalf of, the Trainee Advisory Committee. My name is Brittany Matenchuk, and I've been with WCHRI TAC for a year and a half now. And so this is the second year of the mentorship program, and we are expanding it even more next year. And I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Alberta and WCHRI are located on Treaty 6 territory, which is a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Anishinaabe, Inuit, and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. This is the final workshop, so you have made it to the end of your mentorship program. And I just want to go over what the WCHRI TAC is, because we don't get a lot of chances to talk with people about what it is that the Trainee Advisory Committee does. So we are composed of students and postdoctoral fellows from all academic levels and all areas, and we represent all of the research disciplines and pillars within WCHRI. We report to the Program Advisory Committee, who reports to the Executive Director, and we run our own programs to support WCHRI trainees. We provide feedback and suggestions to improve the WCHRI programs and to try and get more trainee engagement. And we provide input on career and skill building opportunities for in-training members. And we advise on and participate in WCHRI Research Day workshops, topics, and formats. We did get back the midpoint feedback from the mentorship program. So 70% of the mentees responded, and 100% had met with their mentor at least once when we were at the midway, and 67% had met with their mentor more than 3 times, which is definitely what we want to see, because the more FaceTime you get, the better that relationship is going to be. 67% of the mentors also had another mentor meeting coming up, and 90% felt that their mentors had engaged with them, which is really great to see and really talks to the level of support that we've had from the mentors in the program. So today is National Indigenous Peoples Day. And I just wanted to acknowledge that we as leaders and knowledge holders are responsible to meaningfully contribute to reconciliation in Canada. And as we know, research involving Indigenous peoples in Canada has typically been conducted by non-Indigenous researchers and in a manner that has not benefited and sometimes harmed both Indigenous communities and individuals. Now, it is our duty to be cognizant of how institutional and cultural practices, including mentorship within academia, can and have resulted in the exclusion of individuals who identify as part of a minority group, including those who identify as Indigenous peoples. And this is our guest speaker, Dr. Jocelyn Cook, PhD and MBA. She's going to be discussing mentorship in women's and children's health research. And 1 second, because her bio is hidden to me.
I don't know where that picture came from, but
clearly
I've been having a good hair day.
Oh, I think it looks lovely and so sunny. And so Dr. Cook received her Bachelor of Science degree in Honors Biology from Bishop's University, and then a PhD in Reproductive Physiology from the Medical University of South Carolina. She studied the effects of alcohol consumption on preterm birth for her postdoctoral fellowship. Just letting someone in. For her postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Alberta, and she also completed an MBA with a focus on economics and health policy from the University of Saskatchewan. Dr. Cook was an assistant professor in the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the University of Saskatchewan before joining the Government of Canada, where she held a number of executive leadership roles at the Public Health Agency, Health Canada, Assisted Human Reproduction Canada, and as the Executive Director of the CIHR Strategy for Patient-Oriented Research, which is so impressive. She joined the Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists of Canada as its first Chief Scientific Officer in 2014, with the vision of facilitating and the strengthening of recognition and incorporation of academic science and evidence into the work of the SOGC and their membership. In her role, she oversees all activities related to academic programs, clinical practice guidelines, research, JOGC operations, and public health related activities and programs. Dr. Cook also sits on the SOGC's Board of Directors and its Executive Committee, Regional CME and ACSC Planning Committees, and represents the SOGC and its work nationally and internationally. She is an adjunct professor in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at the University of Ottawa, and is a principal and co-investigator on a number of funded research proposals. Her specific research interests include substance use during pregnancy, perinatal mental health, trends for maternal morbidity and mortality, collecting diagnostic data, and health professional education and training. In her spare time, she has been seen running marathons, trying to figure out how to get better at Peloton, and living vicariously through her two daughters. So, Dr. Cook, I will let you take it away and I will stop sharing.
Okay, thanks. Hi, everybody. That bio makes me sound kind of ADD, but we shall see. Okay, I just put my screen on. Can you see it? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So hi, everybody. There are only 8 of you here. So we will have fun together. So anyway, glad to be here today, this afternoon or morning or wherever it is for you. And I wasn't actually really sure what I was supposed to talk about. I have 13, earlier it was 8,000. I don't know how it went down to 1393 unread emails. So apologies if I owe anybody anything, but I made a talk anyway. So here we go. I think it should hit some of your criteria. So I was thinking, in the middle of the night when you don't sleep, maybe it's because your estrogen runs out. I'm not really sure, but I was thinking about mentoring and formal mentoring and informal mentoring, and what does it really mean? And so obviously Wikipedia has a nice little definition. And it's really just defined as when someone shares knowledge, skills, and experience to help another person progress. And the progression could be professional or personal. And nowadays, with the struggle between work-life balance and all the discussions around it, even how you can sort of be successful in all the roles that you play in your personal life as well as your professional life. And so there's another thing I learned about that's a formal thing, even though I feel like we do it informally all the time, but it's called reverse mentoring. And when it's someone younger or somebody less experienced, actually mentor somebody more senior. And so it's not really managing up, but it's kind of like mentoring up. And so, the goal really is that everybody has things to learn from each other. And it's important to educate the more experienced older folks sometimes about certain things, perspectives, knowledge, things that we hear about today that the younger folks are definitely more engaged with and more knowledgeable with and insightful with. Probably things around diversity, inclusion, definitely around technology, and how to use it, and definitely around the upmarket trends. And we have kind of a joke in our office where I sit in my office and I try to do things electronically, and sometimes I yell or get frustrated, and then somebody will say, oh my gosh, oh look, I'm admitting people. Oh my gosh, do you need a millennial? And I'm like, yep. And so they come in and then they fix all the things on my computer. And I think it's really been fascinating because there are huge differences just in terms of, I'm not that old, but I'm definitely older than the millennials. And so, just so much around technology and language and approaches and pronouns and all of those things that we as older more experienced folks sometimes just get stuck in habits, and you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it's been really fun on our end, at an organizational level, even to have all of those sort of relationships and informal mentoring, but also formal. Because as staff, we have younger staff and we have more experienced or older staff. And so trying to sort of work together, to learn from each other and to provide input and advice and to ask for input and advice. And so I think the reverse mentoring in my mind it's been really, really fun, and also makes my slide presentations look a lot better, which today you don't have the benefit of. So I made them all by myself. So they're really boring. And you've all been involved in a mentoring program, and probably most of us have at some point in our lives, either being mentored or being the mentor person. But it's really important, for knowledge sharing and kind of talking through things, for support. Am I crazy? Am I on the right page? And those sort of things are really important. And it's just like when you study something, you don't have to make all the mistakes all the time. Sometimes you can actually have some advice and skip a few of them, by learning and hearing from others in terms of what worked for them and their approaches. Gaining practical insights and guidance. It's also helpful to have confidence. It builds a confidence in the person being mentored, that they are doing things, appropriately, or they're getting some positive feedback, or they're just reassured in their approaches. And I think that goes a long way too, especially when you're first starting out on your studies or your career path. Everybody gets better at listening, everybody gets better at talking. Empowerment and confidence we talked about on both ends, really. And then folks can grow a little bit in their positions and always feel that they have, a bit of a support system. And I think this reverse mentoring, is a perfect example of this, but having some wider understanding of all different perspectives, which is really important. And, you can be from different cultures, different organizations, different fields, even different institutions in terms of the way things are done, or different organizations and cultures. As you move throughout your career, the culture of organizations is really different. And so it's really important, I think, to have somebody to go to when you first start at a new place, a new lab, a new university, a new department or job or anything, to say, what's the lay of the land here? How do things work? What sort of, the engagement processes? And you can be in organizations that are flat, in terms of, academics, I find, are fairly flat, or my experiences where everybody has, everybody's engaged, everybody's opinions are just as important as everybody else's, everybody has really important contributions, everybody's kind of listened to and treated the same, way. We're just all different and sometimes better at different things. But then you can be in a really top-down organization. Like I worked for the federal government for 9 years, mostly so I could go and learn what they did, and then kind of figure out how to get all their money, which has been a pretty good experience, actually. So that's good. But they're very top-down. And so having to get all these approvals, and I mean, it's very different in terms of process and culture. And it's really important to kind of glom onto somebody, bribe them with coffee, whatever, but to start to build those relationships, even if they're informal, in terms of mentoring your way and getting advice and how to navigate those systems. And then also just finding that trusted relationship so that you can talk about some of the challenges. And I was actually involved in a really interesting sort of a mentoring program, but more it was called like an executive leadership program, but with science people and HR people. Well, no, not HR people, science and finance and engineering people, because usually we're really horrible managers and leaders according to the, conventional ideas, especially in government. And so we spent so much time trying to peer-to-peer mentor each other in terms of what worked and what didn't work. And probably 95% of what we ended up talking about was always HR issues, difficult, navigating those difficult staffing situations. And so, but it was really helpful to have that network of folks. And we still get together, and it's been like 12 years later. We don't really talk about our difficult HR issues anymore, but at least we do get together and sort of support individuals as they've gone throughout all of their different careers, and you never lose those relationships. And so there are some, characteristics that you can think about from your own mind and maybe write in the chat, so I don't make you turn your camera on, but in terms of what do you think in your own experiences you would look for, what kind of characteristics would you look for in a mentor? We can think about mentees later because, that's important too, but is there anything that you can think of that you would look for? You guys are all at, oh, look, you're not all at Walmart shopping. That's great. Being open-minded, having similar values. I think that's really important. Sometimes you just are on a totally different wavelength from folks in terms of what you do value and what's important and what you really believe is I'm not going to say right, but the behavior or the approach, and it's sort of ingrained in you. And it's really difficult when you have situations where folks are really on different aspects of that. So yeah, listener, approachable, availability, yes, having access, lived experience, and balance between work and life. And so I think these are all, really important things to think about. And there are actually top 10 traits of a great mentor. And so a lot of these things are captured: sharing, being willing to share. They're not just put there because they want to be there. Having a positive attitude and a positive role model, take a personal interest, being enthusiastic is really important. And we call it sucking people into the vortex. Providing guidance, valuing ongoing learning, being respected. You don't want to have a mentor or a mentee really that's not respected. I think that's, that makes things a little bit difficult. Set up and meet ongoing personal and professional goals. And that's really important to decide at the outset what you want to do together, and value the opinions and initiatives of others. And I think something really important is for your mentor to motivate you or to motivate others by setting a good example and walking that walk. And that's something that's a really important characteristic in leadership, as well as, just in mentorship in general. And these are examples of great leaders. And I think, Nature, where we all want to publish, some of you may have published in Nature. I feel like Sandy Davidge and I actually put a paper in there once, submitted a paper, but it got rejected. She's probably got more since then, but nonetheless, there's actually a podcast series that you can listen to about why science in particular needs strong mentors. And a lot of the speakers in the podcast are actually females. And so that brings another sort of lens to thinking about mentorship and support, what you're looking for and what you're also looking to receive. And so it's an interesting podcast, and I would suggest that you would do that. And why do you think that science in particular is a field where we desperately need strong mentorship, whether it's formal or informal? Can you think of some ideas, some reasons why? In the chat, there's nothing in the chat. Nope. Yes. Oh, look, somebody's writing in there. Why do we need strong mentors in science? Nobody knows. Okay. I'll tell you why. No, I'm not going to tell you why. Actually, I wanted to have a conversation about it, about what you think in terms of that. Individualism, I think from my perspective, science is really unique, and it's learning by doing. A lot of situations and times it's learning by doing in the lab. It's learning by doing, by watching, by listening, by seeing how others act and don't act. And so I think science is so cutthroat in terms of being able to be really successful. And you have to have more than just an ability to do research in the lab to be, a great scientist. You have to, which is why I did my MBA. Actually, I was thinking I have to be better on paper than, and in practice, I have to set myself a little bit higher than just being able to work in the lab. And so you have to be able to do budgets. You have to be able to manage people. You have to be a leader. You have to be able to deal with HR. You have to be able to, put your expense claims in. You have to be able to write grants, convince people, market your ideas. You have to be able to see the little tiny ovaries that you're trying to get out of the mouse. You have to be able to be innovative and be able to quickly make some of those decisions around being able to, connect the dots from different fields to be able to bring it to your own work. You have to be able to recruit people and sell your ideas. You have to be able to communicate. You have to be able to read, write, and you have to be able to actually do presentations. So I think there's a lot of different aspects to science, and there's a lot of different aspects for all of the different sort of scopes of the different kinds of careers you can have in science. And I think, things often happen serendipitously, and that's what happened to me. I started out wanting to be a department chairman by the time I was 40. And that's why I did my MBA, because I realized it's sort of like running a small business. And then sort of life happened and went in all kinds of other directions. Sometimes things that, you couldn't predict. But at the same time, having those transferable skills that you spend so much time developing and receiving input and feedback and advice from is really critical, because they are transferable and you can bring them along in life in all different aspects. And I think the points in the chat, a lot of science and academia is not really intuitive. And it's really nice to talk to people who've done it before and find out what's worked and what hasn't worked. And I think a unique thing about science and academia is you make your friends there, and it creates your community and your network. And you're all going through the same things together and experiencing the same things together. And so those mentor-mentee relationships probably also trickle around too, because sharing advice that you've heard and experienced is also, a part of that close-knit community that I think is really unique. And also having the support to have the courage to do new things, try new things, and to be able to either fail or succeed. But that's what science is about, right? And somebody wrote that innovation needs support. I think that's absolutely true. And so if you think about mentoring in your academic or your science context, just like we've kind of talked about in summary, there's peer-to-peer mentoring and how you work with your fellow, trainees or colleagues in terms of talking your way through what works and what doesn't work, and experiences and support and being there for each other is that trainee community, I think, is really important. You're also mentored, whether you like it or not, by your supervisor or your employer. And so, when I started graduate school, you didn't have to pick your supervisor before you went to school. Well, at my school anyway. So I got to do some lab rotations and try to figure out where that relationship felt like it would be a good one. Was I interested in the science, and did I feel like it was a good match in terms of your mentor? Because you're stuck with them for a long time and they're stuck with you. And so I think it was, it's really important to think about that. And now, as an older person, not a millennial, like I am way too old to try to fit myself into some job where I don't really fit, or that, you have to claw your way to respect for another 5 or 6 years. And I'm just too old for that. In the past, I was happy to sell myself. I can do this and I can do this, and I could do it, and that was fine. But I'm way too old for that now. And I'm like, here's who I am. Here's what you get. And I'm too old to try to, work in my straight box when I'm like, half of the time. And so, I think that also changes, over time in terms of the kind of mentors and training environments that you're looking for. Then we already talked quite a bit about reverse mentoring, which I think is fabulous and fantastic. And then also those mentoring relationships, how do they change throughout your career? And I think, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the evolution of my career, but I always seem to have been hanging out with really old people. All my friends were like 70. And my husband's like, why do you have all these 70-year-old friends? But they're fascinating. They've done so much. and, and their stories are fascinating, and they kind of just take you under the wing, and you can't replace that. And you can get a lot farther by getting drug along and introduced by people who everybody knows. And so, I think that's another important characteristic of a mentor, who takes it seriously to introduce you around and to make sure that you're not standing off in the corner all by yourself. And then there's also challenges of those mentoring relationships. And I'm sure you can probably think of those, and especially if you're in a really small lab, and it's not working out, or, all sorts of things. We talked a little bit about the difference in values, or the difference in ethics, or and it doesn't mean somebody's unethical, just in those difference of what's important. And the work-life balance thing is really, really important. And I think probably everybody's struggling with that now. How do you try to be a good role model for work-life balance? And I went to a talk once about all the different generations of folks, and it was fascinating because as you go through different generations, people have very different approaches to work and approaches to life. And so there's the directive, hierarchical, go to work 8 to 5 every day, bring your bag, your lunch in a little brown bag. And then there's the expectation to have, flexible everything from all over the place. And so it's been an evolution. And so for your supervisors, they're and for us as employers, having employees from all different aspects of those sort of, I guess, approaches and values. And, when you guys don't think about it, but some of us might think about it, some of the younger folks never heard about the Berlin Wall before, for example, or didn't have to dial a phone, or, ride your bike with walkie-talkies and get your tongue stuck on the mercury-filled, lead-filled swing sets. Like, those are experiences that are basically wiped out in terms of the experiences of the younger folks. And so, understanding that, and then understanding why reversely we suck at some kind of technology, I think is it's really important in terms of that also culture around the work environment. And so for me, in terms of my mentoring mentee journey, which was kind of crazy, but I went to undergrad school. Well, I grew up in New Brunswick, and I couldn't have gone away to university if I didn't get a scholarship. So I'll be damned, I was getting a scholarship because I was going to stay home and go to school. And, when the universities, well, you guys don't know because you're probably all younger, but universities, they come and they set up this little booths in your gym at your high school. And so Bishop's had a little booth. They had a pretty looking campus. School color was purple. How can you go wrong with that? Applied there, got into biology program with scholarship. So went, had an amazing time. But, I was kind of on the cusp of being an English major because I really like Shakespeare, and being a science major because science is awesome. And when I went there, small university, 1,700 students, small department, my physiology professor was amazing. And he was so inspiring, and he was just amazing. And so that sealed the deal for me. And he was a bit of a mentor in science. He did a little bit of research in a small school. And for the folks who graduated with me in an honors program, I think there were maybe 9 of us with honors degrees, small school. We all went on to postgraduate work. And I'm pretty sure that most of it was because of the physiology professor. And so, you get these mentors really who make a huge difference in your career path. And at the same time, they may not even know how influential, whatever, in how much they influence people in terms of career paths. And so I came away from there thinking science is really fun. And you know what? Research is fun. And I thought medical school would be way too much work. So nobody, I was like, I'm not going to medical school at the last minute. That's going to be too much work. So then I went to graduate school. Then I learned about how much I really love placentas because, like I said, we got to do those little rotations through the lab. I ended up with Carrie Randall, who definitely does not 100% look like that anymore. Her hair's kind of gray, but other than that. And she was an amazing mentor. She was terrifying. She had really high standards. She did not like kids, didn't have a maternal instinct in her. Um, and I was her first and only graduate student. She swears she didn't say she thinks probably having me as a graduate student was more difficult than giving birth ever would have been. She still denies that, but I feel like I heard her to say that. But worked really hard, and I still thought science was really fun. I learned that research and academics is a really serious business. Not serious in the way you can have fun, but it's hardcore. There are standards, there's excellence, and you have to work really hard to achieve it. You can't wear your soccer shorts all the time. Also learned that. Got a little bit of a mentor discussion about what was appropriate to wear in the lab, not soccer shorts. And also the importance of practicing presentation. She'd say, start again, start again, start again, and I start again. But in the end of it, perseverance and innovation are really, really rewarding. And I still think in my mind, this is Carrie Randall. I only started calling her Carrie like 5 years ago. Call her Dr. Randall because she was a bit scary, but amazing. But I still think, oh my gosh, what would Carrie do? What would Dr. Randall do if I, did this or wore my shorts when I wasn't supposed to be wearing them to the lab or something? And so again, this woman had such high standards. And she said, I'm not thinking of your PhD project, my friend. You figure it out. You go learn all the things in the lab. I'll give you all the opportunities, but you have to come to me with your own project idea. I'll help you. I'll tell you if it's horrible, but you come to me. And that's what happened. And I'm very thankful for that, all the time. Not so thankful when I used to ask her to come and help me and she couldn't see the little needle threads anymore, but that's another story. And so an amazing, mentoring relationship there. Then I came I love alcohol, that's for fun, but it was because I was doing alcohol research. And so Carrie Randall was like the grandmother of fetal alcohol syndrome. And we had a mouse model of prenatal alcohol exposure. We had a placental perfusion model. And when I was looking for postdocs, and my CHR funded my PhD and my postdoc, and NSERC funded some of my postdoc. So I had lots of options in terms of where to go. And the reason I came to the University of Alberta was because I loved the alcohol work. So when I was doing my PhD, I was in the Center for Drug and Alcohol Programs in the psychiatry department, which was a clinical department, which is why I couldn't wear my soccer shorts all the time because it wasn't professional. But I really loved my work because of the effects of prenatal alcohol exposure. And so Dave Olson and Sandy Davidge and Peter Mitchell had a great, shtick going on at the Perinatal Research Center. And I was able to come and keep doing my alcohol research, but with a preterm birth lens and looking at some molecular biology and looking at some mesenteric vessel perfusion stuff with Sandy and some oxytocin receptors with Peter. And it was really fun. But the reason I chose to come there was because those mentors appreciated the fact that I loved the alcohol and pregnancy work. And that was sort of my, grounded passion. And they loved the preterm birth model that, the alcohol and pregnancy work lent itself to. And so it was actually really a great fit because I got to do my alcohol and pregnancy work, and they got to expand beyond some of the, standardized work that they were doing in the lab related to receptors and preterm birth and cardiovascular adaptations of pregnancy. So it was great. And so it was really a different mentor experience because Carrie Randall was pretty, gruff, I guess was the word. And Dave, he always told me how great I was. And so you come from two really different experiences. And I was like, I'm not great. I can't be great. Like, I just screwed this up. So it was just two really different environments, and they were both really awesome. You just had to sort of figure out my place in those. And so I came away still thinking science was fun after 3 years at the U of A. And what I really learned was making a focused plan is really helpful, and labeling all your test tubes. Don't just think that you're going to be like, okay, these ones with the dots or whatever. Yeah, I thought I could remember those and then I couldn't. Perinatal research is a really small field. And so you're always sort of one step connected to people all around the world, really, nationally and internationally. Really loved being around all those smart people, really loved working with students in the lab. And I still keep in touch with students that I had in the lab. In fact, one of them is a family doc who does a lot of obstetrics work in Sherwood Park or St. Albert or somewhere over there. And another one's an OB/GYN. And so it's really fun to, always have those relationships that are ongoing. And also, we really learned that we shouldn't store our ice cream bars in the P32 freezer because we got in trouble from the radiation safety people sometimes for that. See, nobody told us not to do that. If somebody had told us in the beginning, we would have had not gotten in so much trouble. And I think just in terms of academics and science, thinking about different, like I love the academic research environment and I miss it. I mess in it still. I still am on grants and do all kinds of things, but I'm not in the lab full time being an academic person. I miss it, but I chose to leave it because I had a really great job offer, actually at the Public Health Agency of Canada, to oversee their diagnostic guidelines around prenatal alcohol exposure and fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And remember, alcohol was sort of like that was the field that I was really engaged in and really motivated by, not for any personal reasons, but and so I left, and I was recruited by Dawn Walker, who's on my left. I don't know if she's on your left, and she really helped me, really took me under her wing and helped me understand how government works. How does policy work? How can you actually use evidence to make an impact on programs and policies and ministers? And how do you get them to support your idea? Being really prepared, having all kinds of ideas in your back pocket. And when the minister's office calls you at your little desk, you go up there with all of your ideas. And so she taught me how important it is to read the room and make linkages to anything so that you're sort of moving, the idea around. And she also taught me that, policymakers, ministers, they don't have time to learn all the evidence and all the science, just like physicians don't these days. And it's our job, my job as a scientist, to be able to synthesize that information and feed it to them in little bite-sized pieces that show the impact of that. And, an example, we're talking about developmental origin of health and disease, we're talking about epigenetics, we're talking about maternal mental health. And so helping them understand that a mom has a mental health issue during pregnancy, that baby's DNA is affected, and it can, susceptibility can be passed on in generations. Little nuggets like that, but you have to say it in a different way, is really critical in terms of influencing policy. And so that's what Dawn really did for me. And then I moved on to Sterling Claren when I left government. He's in the middle. He's looking very thoughtful and smart, which he is. And he did all the diagnostic work around fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and was one of the key people on one of the first papers. And he just taught me, just kind of chip at it and keep going and have fun. He had all the ideas, and then I made him happen. And so we also made a great pair. And, still in touch, obviously, today. And Graham Smith is on the right. Many of you probably have worked with Graham, and he's one of the smartest people I know, an MD, PhD, and loves placentas, and department chair at Queens, and just really pragmatic. And I work with Graham a lot now, and we've been also friends for a really long time. But again, having that sort of just very cut and dry focus in his personality, I think has been, really great in terms of being very matter of fact. And so they've all had very different personalities. Dawn was, let's just make it happen. Let's toe the line. We'll figure out how to get it done. And this makes sense. Sterling was very philosophical. Graham is very cut and dry. And then the last woman, Deanne Franker, and she's actually the new CEO of the SOGC. And I've known her for a long time. And she's she's somebody that I would love to be someday, except she speaks way better French and she's way more hardcore than me. And so I'd be afraid everyone was mad at me, but she is not like that. And so what I'm doing from her, I think, is just learning again, how do you take what you do and how are you able to make things happen up at the next level and sort of help people make those decisions and not get caught in that little circular sort of, I don't even know what you call it, way of doing things going around and around. And so, she brings the vision and the personality and the strength really to the field. And I think, she has a real mission, and I'm really excited. I've learned a lot already and also been validated from that perspective as well, because, you share the same vision and values and goals and ethics and determination. And I think when you put those people together, you can make really great things happen. And then you see that reverse mentoring, especially in the health field, because the medical students and the residents are our future. And we have to make sure that we're listening to them and understanding and learning from them in terms of being able to do things and provide support and help that's useful to them. And so I think it all, just kind of comes back in terms of navigating those personalities and those experiences. But I think for us, and I mean, I don't know what all of you all do, if you're all basic scientists or some of you are clinicians or whatever, but there are so many opportunities out there that half the time we would never even occur to us, that are out there. And I think having the exposure to different people and networks and mentors, that they can help you have those experiences, I think is so critical, because there are options and opportunities, and half the time we never even know what they are. And we can use science and we can use research and we can use our translational skills in so many ways that I think are really unique. I think it's really unique in terms of that. I don't know how good I'd be at pipetting if I'd still win the pipette contest, but I'd be up for trying. And so I think just in terms of wrapping up, I know this is your last kind of session, but I learned to make a word cloud all by myself though. So I think that's pretty good.
That's so impressive. I don't know how to.
Well, there's if you can Google it, and there's a free program, but nonetheless, I figured out how to change the color. So I was pretty proud of myself. But anyway, I think, just hopefully as you've all been through your program and your mentoring program, and you're thinking about what you have learned, what you're taking away, what you've given, what you've experienced, and then, how it's actually shaping you to do what you want to do. You also learn what not to do, or what you don't want to do, or how you don't want to approach things. And that's just as important. But I think, what I learned is it's important to listen, always be an optimist. Don't be a jerk. You know what? There's a lot of options out there of people to work with. You don't have to work with the jerks, and you don't have to be a jerk. That's my latest thing after coming off of 2 weeks of meetings last week. My mentors always said, I don't care if you screw things up, and admitting your screw ups are really important, but come with a solution. And I think that was some of the best advice that I got, because there was a time I wrote this briefing note about the head of Stats Canada, like the head guy. And I said, well, he might be a bit prickly because he doesn't like this and this. And then I freaking send it out to all the people, including him, which I almost had a heart attack. And I went to whoever my boss was at the time, the assistant deputy minister, and I said, all right, here's what I did. But what I did instead is I updated the agenda really quick and then resent it out with a note and said, okay, everybody, this is a new agenda. Then I called his secretary to let her know that there was a new agenda, because half the people don't read their emails, but still. But what happened is I got him in his car cell phone. So I don't know why I had that number, but anyway, we were buddies after that. But I went to the meeting being really paranoid that I was going to get in trouble, and everybody else thought it was funny. So thankfully he didn't notice. But anyway, admit your stuff and have solutions. And I think rolling up your sleeves, and I remember I had one staff person say to me once, will you pay me too much to do this? I'm like, do you know what I've been doing today? I've been making plane reservations for you because you're in a meeting, so just everybody's rolling up their sleeves and pitching in, and in a not-for-profit, everybody does. Old people, this is what Starlene Claren told me, old people like phone calls. So don't text me, don't email me, just pick up the phone and phone me, which I probably have to do after this. Young people know a lot of things. Relationships, it's actually all about relationships, and relationships matter. And so keeping that, into perspective, I think is really important, because we're in a small world, really. And perceptions, we talk a lot about this on my team. Perceptions are really important. And so even though you're doing X, people don't know all the context and they don't know all the reasons. And so perceptions are really, really important. And part of that was why I shouldn't be wearing my soccer shorts to the lab all the time. And then another thing that we talk about a lot is being clear about expectations. And I think, people don't assume, you can't assume and you can't insinuate, you just tell them, here's what I expect. Or what do you expect from me? How do you want to work together? How do you want me to give you my stuff, but I need you to respond this way, or to provide input when I need it. So just laying out those expectations, because even in an employer or work environment, in a lab environment, in a mentoring environment, it's really important. And then everybody just kind of knows the rules of the game. And so I think those are some of the really critical things that I've learned by glomming onto really smart people and then figuring out how, to work with them as a team, I think has been, an experience that I've been so lucky to have. And so those are my sort of favorite lessons. But you can think of some of your favorite lessons. And since there's only 4 of you, you don't really have to do that. But I thought there'd be more and we could have a fun conversation, but that's okay. And so I think it's important to reflect on what you did get out of your experience and your program, and to be always mindful. Sometimes it's going to come back in your brain and say, oh my gosh, what would this person, my old mentor from 15 years ago, tell me to do, or what was their advice? Because it does stick with you. And I think you have all just experienced a crazy time in terms of COVID, and everybody was sort of trying to get through it together. And so I think that the lessons that you learn and that you will have to pass on, and your transferable skills in a whole different way are going to be really important. And I think science needs us. And when I was at the University of Alberta, we did a thing called Let's Talk Science, and we mentored these school kids. We kind of adopted them, and we went in and, and talked about science and made it really fun. And they were emailing us questions, and it was adopt a scientist. It was fun. And a whole bunch of us did that program. And we've also, I've done other things at the Huntsman Marine Science Center, for example, in New Brunswick, and helping, again, bring science to life for those future generations that we really owe it to. Because I think now more than ever, we love science. I love science. I'm sure you guys do, but I think now more than ever, the world really needs lots of people who love science and who are able to do it, interpret it, explain it, apply it, and learn from it. And so I think that we're in a really good spot right now.
Yeah. And actually, because everyone here is a WCHRI GSA student, they are required as a condition of their funding to go and do a presentation in a school at any level, so elementary or high school.
Cool.
And I know when I did mine, I got a question of how do you evaluate which science to listen to? And it was right when all of the COVID messaging was coming out. And I was like, well, that's actually a very kind of hard question to answer for you. Yeah.
That is true. And in fact, the Public Health Agency, because I work a lot with Teresa Tam, and they're really struggling with that. How do you help people know, what's good science and what's not good science? And so it's a real problem, because everybody, you can't read all the comments, or it kind of makes you lose your faith in humankind, but you just have to keep plugging along and hoping that, the good science prevails.
Yeah, definitely. And it was very hard to answer of you can't tell high school students to go and read through research papers. No. So
No, you can't. At our organization, even because we do clinical practice guidelines, which are usually quite technical, we're kind of struggling with how do we take what patients need to know or what the public needs to know from those, because it's also a whole different skill set. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I can write science and I think it's all super important. And then I write way too much stuff. And that's not public kind of writing. And so it's a different skill set.
yeah. Well, and a lot of different places now are requiring the lay abstract, and there is
Oh, no.
evaluation based on the lay abstract. So it's a skill to get towards. But even in one conference that I went to, like I felt like I had maybe over explained a couple concepts, but an individual who was like up in their area, but maybe a few levels separate from what I was discussing. And they're like, I really liked your presentation because at least I knew what you were talking about. And it's important to keep in mind that even though we're experts in this, and it doesn't necessarily apply to that whole other area.
Yeah. And that our language, like the words that we use are regular words to us, but not necessarily like run-of-the-mill words to other folks. And so I think that's important too.
Yeah. I'm going to open up, if it's okay for you,
Yeah.
Jocelyn, questions from Claire or Asna. If you had any questions for Jocelyn while we have her here.
Yeah, sure. I have a question.
Sure.
I was just wondering, so when you were like, I think you mentioned like you had a lot of flexibility in choosing postdocs because you had CIHR funding, right? And I think you said NSERC as well. Like that's super awesome. So how did you make, or like what else went into your decision-making process there?
You mean to come to the U of A?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I did my grad work in the States, which was awesome, and in the South, which was really awesome. But to be fair, the only thing that went into my decision was that I was allowed to be flexible on projects. So my project wasn't being handed to me other than, hey, we're doing mechanisms of preterm birth. And so I had a lot of flexibility in being able to do some side projects and things. Whereas some of the other projects and places I looked at going were really awesome, but you're going to come in the lab and work on this specific project and lead that project. And that's also good too, except I really liked the flexibility for the innovation and the flexibility to be able to work, collaborate with Sandy's lab and with Carlos. And then, Peter was in the same lab. And so having that sense of sort of community at that time was really important, and learning from all of the other people and being able to apply it to my work. So I wasn't given like a straight recipe. It's like, oh yeah, come in and show us your model and we'll look at some receptors and then we'll work together to figure out how else, we can grow things and what else we need to know. And so I liked that. I liked that I was learning some molecular biology, barf, but I learned it because I was such a hardcore physiologist. And so learning some of those mRNA, DNA isolation techniques and RT-PCR and all that kind of stuff was also really important. So it was sort of I was looking at the science from expanding my scope a bit, but being able to learn from all those different techniques and partners around the lab to be able to collaborate in terms of moving my own work up to another level. And so that's really all the things that went into the decision. Definitely wasn't the weather, no offense, almost froze to death. It definitely wasn't the restaurants, although there's some pretty good ones, but it really was the science. At that point, I was really, motivated by that. My decision-making would be different now. Not back then, but now at this point in my life, I would pick weather. I would pick beach. I would pick, but it's just different. So I think, yeah, the networking, what Dave offered, you know, because I was getting funded, I had travel money. And so I was able to go to a few meetings and present data and information, which is also really important and important to get you known in the field, and also important on your, you know, on your CV. So it was the environment, I guess, that I really, really felt like I belonged in.
Thank you.
Asna, do you have any questions?
I actually just have one question. It's kind of the inverse of what Claire asked, which is, you know, to answer your question, best advice I've ever gotten was when to know how to quit and how to leave a project, because that's very difficult for, you know, people that go into science and have a passion for this, and you develop a connection with your project, and when to know just back off and let it go. So I guess because you've had so many different experiences and so many different phases of your life, what decision, what allowed you to move on from a place or designation, or go from science to an MBA, or leave a lab, leave a country? Like what core things allowed you to let go and move on to a different place?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think so. I've never really let go, to be fair. Like I still have, I mean, I guess for me, a lot of the fun was in the relationships and the people. And so I've kept in touch with all those people. I'll go to South Carolina. In fact, I'm going in 6 weeks. I'm staying at Carrie's house. You know, it's all, so I guess for me, it was that, and being able to have the connections. You just finish your PhD, you finish it. I mean, you're excited to be finished. And then it's a bit of a weird personality readjustment, because you've been working for 5 years or however many years, hardcore, with your motivation to get your PhD, and then you get it. And you're like, now who am I? And what do I do? And I found that really weird. And then I went, you know, and going from a supervisor who didn't give many compliments to one who gave lots of compliments was also really weird. It wasn't a negative thing. It was just a whole adjustment, because now how did I define myself? What was my goal? And so I had a weird, hard time with trying to figure out what my goal was. I don't even know if I actually knew what my goal was, but I think it was to learn lots of things and to be able to start to think about, you know, moving my field a little bit in my own scope. And at the same time, during my postdoc, I decided to do an MBA for the reasons that I suggested. But then I realized how it was really cool, and I really loved it. So it was this whole other skill set and things I had never thought about that were really kind of sciencey, to be honest, or really applied to management and leadership. And so I liked that aspect of it. And then I guess, you know, you get 2 years into your postdoc and you feel like you have to start looking for your job, because you only have 3 years of funding. So, you know, that was sort of the motivation to me. And I had a bunch of different job interviews at like Stanford, which was really cool, and Texas A&M, and I can't even remember, but really fun places. And Florida, in what was that? Florida Atlantic University down in Boca. So smaller kind of schools, because I was new, and people have to invest in you and have to take a chance on you that you're going to be able to get grant money and bring funding in. And so, you know, it's a bit of a gamble. And what I was finding was established people were like onto their second or third job that were getting the jobs. And I was like second all the time. And so then what happened is another faculty position came open in Florida, and they called me and said, hey, we want to give you this. And so, but I had just started my MBA and blah, 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 and my husband didn't really, he had just started a job and he didn't want to move. So that sort of influenced us not going. When I still, like, I cried, I was really upset. I really like the South, but anyway, so we didn't end up going to Florida, and we ended up coming to Ottawa. And part of the reason, I mean, I had to have a job after, well, I had a faculty job for a while. And then this job came up. I think for me, it's been being motivated and intrigued by the opportunities that have come up. And so they've been really cool opportunities. And it was hard for me to leave like lab research, because when I went to work for the public health agency, there's no lab research. And also a really weird adjustment because you weren't allowed to go in evenings and weekends. So I thought that was bizarre. But being able to talk about science and the impact of it, and travel and hang out with ministers of health and really feel the influence on programs. Like I went up when the minister's office called and said, "Hey, Jocelyn, we have $1 million. Can you spend it in 3 weeks?" I said, "Yep." And I went up there with like 4 ideas and got the Inuit Health Survey funded. And then I went up to the Arctic and hung out with them and watched them take all the health measures. And like, that's really cool. And that was really making, I feel like, a difference in the lives of the Inuit Health Survey participants. It was so cool. And so I think have always been motivated by the opportunity. And I think being able to use science, talk about science, be an expert, talk the policy language, has been a really good opportunity for me. And so I think not having the courage to leave wasn't really an option for me. Having the pull to leave was the real factor. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I have to do this job. Like, I can't not do it. It's so cool. And so when you work in government, not that I would recommend it, but I had a great experience. I went to French school full-time, 4.5 months, 8 hours a day, one-on-one. Traveled all around with ministers, went to executive leadership training. Like, it was a really good experience for me. And when you're in government, you get to move around. And so I got to go to Assisted Human Reproduction Canada and be their chief scientific officer. Different etiology, but different effects on fetal growth and development. So, maternal factors that affect fetal outcomes, same as alcohol, same as nicotine, same as substance use, same sort of process, but different outcomes. And I thought that was fascinating. And so, that's where I am at the SOGC. I mean, I'd never had a job for more than 3 years. And I think I've been here for like 8 years, but it all changes. And I think it's just like research. Things change all the time. And you can, again, I make my own fun. I do all kinds of things that I think are fun and important, like this. It's not part of my job description, but it's really important to have a chief scientific officer that does science and is sort of engaged in all different things, around women's health. And so that's how I was sort of sucked to the SOGC, because they offered me the job. I said, "No, I don't want your job. I like my own job." I was executive director of a FASD research network. It was freaking great. But then they're like, "Yeah, but you got to get out of just being a substance use person." I'm like, "Yeah, I probably do." So off I went. Do I still do substance use work? Absolutely. Do I know more now about ectopic pregnancies, endometriosis, chronic pelvic pain, and vulvas than I ever want to know before? Absolutely. But it still kind of all comes back to women's health. And so I think you just get those opportunities that you're like, holy crap, this is awesome. I can go do this. And 3-4 jobs I've had, they're not even real jobs. They're like, "Oh, here's your office. Make it happen." Like 4 jobs. And then, so for this job, they're like, "We've never at SOGC, we've never had a CSO." And I'm like, and they're like, "So are you okay with that?" I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, sure. No problem. You just figure it all out." So for me, it's been the excitement, but also the flexibility to be able to do stuff that that keeps you motivated. You can't do expense claims all day long. You will get really bored. You got to use your brain. Long-winded answer.
Yeah.
Finding opportunities and then serendipity as well. Yeah.
100%. I think I got one job by sitting next to Dawn Walker on the airplane. I knew her, but still. Another job with talking to Eleanor Wilson, who was the CEO at Assisted Reproduction Canada, with Dawn Walker in the Air Canada lounge. If you can get past that thing, you meet all kinds of great people in there. So
that's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I'll just steal your time a tiny bit longer.
Yep, no problem.
I know in a lot of what you mentioned, you talked about kind of the next step of mentorship is really us learning how to be managers. And right now, many of us, like GSA students, are not, but we will eventually need to be. And like you said, it's a huge problem in science and engineering in many areas where nobody really learns how to be a good manager. So what can we do now that helps us start to build those skills?
Other than an MBA or an MHA?
Other than an
MBA. I think again, it's not rocket science. A lot of, and we talked about this in MBA school a lot, management and leadership are different things. So you can be a really good manager and not a great leader, or vice versa. And I've experienced both aspects. I've had mentors and employers and bosses who've been great managers, but not really leaders, and vice versa. And if you find someone who's both a manager and a leader at the same time, I think, glom onto those people, because, they're, some of the skill sets overlap, but they all don't. And so I think, there's seminars, I'm sure, somewhere that you can take and that you can listen to. And, it sounds stupid, but those dealing with difficult people books, because 90% of your problems are going to be managing people who are difficult. And so, and always, I guess you read those tips that are things like, think about other people's perspectives and keep your mouth shut, like, don't be the person that's trying to talk about, oh yeah, I know this person's difficult. And, those kinds of things. Like, you have to be very careful about your kind of listening and supporting, but not throwing people under the bus, or not, not blaming other people and those kinds of things. And so I think navigating tough conversations, working with difficult people, understanding also, I think this is, those little personality tests that are like, you learn about your leadership style or your learning style and all that. And you can do those even online and have them. I mean, they sound kind of weird, but they're not. And I think it's really fun to understand. Even as a leadership team at my organization, we did this because we got one guy who seems to jump in decisions. Yeah, because he doesn't need that much info because he's red, and then you have the other people who can't make decisions because they think about this and this and this. And so it helps sort of put those things into perspective, and it helps sort of bring the frustration level of everybody down, because recognizing everybody's different, they learn different ways is important. So any kind of training you can do in terms of those sorts of aspects, I think are really important. And there's all kinds of programs for that, probably free, and I think that's important. I don't know, other than, I try to get my team to take a project management class online, because we all do it. We're all probably really good project managers, but there's a language around it, and there's a few tools that you can use. And so those kinds of things are invaluable in terms of bringing you to that next level of competence and professionalism.
Thank you. Definitely. I think it's something that in the future, the PD, because we all have to have like professional development, and I'm hoping it'll go a little bit more that way, because often it kind of skips over the managerial and leadership sides of development.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, I had a lot of opportunity even at the U of A to have students and help them and mentor them and manage them. And again, we're still friends today. And, I think those are great opportunities too. So anytime you have the opportunity to do that, I think it's great. And then just watching the people you admire in terms of their approaches or the ways, that they engage or interact, or how they manage, I think is also really important. And you can learn what feels like is your style, because there's all different styles. What is your style, and then what's not your style, because it's pretty hard to force a non-style, which is kind of what I was saying about those different cultures, because then you're going to realize where you're comfortable and where you're fit, also where you're respected and you're valued. And that's really important too.
Thank you. I think to add on to that for resources, the U of A does have like a career center, and they do free career counseling. And it doesn't just have to be for people that are considering switching to a different career. It can be any topics related to career development. And if that's kind of like a different style of mentorship, of getting those skills on being a good manager, or talking through potential postdoc ideas is an option as well.
Yeah, postdocs are fun.
Doesn't feel very fun looking for them.
Very.
It's fun.
There's too many options. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, I think, I mean, you have to be excited about the project, obviously, and then whether you want to have some flexibility or not. And I don't know if you guys get to go visit, but I got to go visit them all. And so just feeling that relationship in the labs, because I'm a real people person. And so I was really excited about being able to come. Like, I think I went to a hockey game with Sandy and Dave as soon as I arrived. And, you know, like, it's just that kind of, I can work here. I love these people feeling. But then I went somewhere else, like Duke. And I was like, frig, Duke. They don't even go outside the lab. They just like, you know, so it was just, again, a really different feeling. And so I think that's, you know, that's important. I don't know if you can't really get it on Zoom, but you can try. And if you know people in the lab who've had that experience too. If it's women's health, I probably know all the people. So, so there's that. But yeah, and I oversee all the department chairs for some unknown reason. And that's the other thing too. So of obstetrics, I mean, but is your department have opportunities for you? You know, are you just going to be in there and being a little machine in the lab, or are there opportunities for, you know, mentorship, for working across teams? Do they have some big MRI fancy machine thing that they're starting, you know, to do new things with? Are you going to get the opportunity to review grants or participate in writing them, or write your own grants? You know, those are sort of things that I think are important to consider. And yeah, and something you're going to be excited about, then you're going to be really mad if someone else got to go there and you didn't.
That's good advice. Thank you.
No problem. If you think of anything else, you can just email me. I do have 1,000 unread emails and 83, but I will get to them eventually.
Don't we all?
Oh, I know, it's bad.
I did think it was hilarious that you mentioned ADD, because I think a lot of women in science have a few traits that might overlap there, but that's just like our little superpower. It's fine.
We call it bionic.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. And when you find someone who revs at the same revving level, like my new CEO, oh my God, we're just like, it is, and it's amazing. But if you have someone you got to wait for a friggin' ever, it's like, you got to find someone that works at your same speed.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Rate determining steps. Yeah.
That's cool.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn. And we will be, as long as it's okay with everyone, we will be sharing this video so that many more mentees will be able to benefit from your amazing knowledge and experience, because like you have done so many amazing things.
I've done a lot of weird things, but it's been fun. And I've loved almost all of it. CHR was my least loved job.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think you're kind of career goals for probably most of us. So in one way or another, one of your jobs is our career goals.
It's fun. It's great. Really. And you know what? I have 2 kids, and one of them's just finished second year at Queen's in life sciences. And the other one's just starting at Guelph next year in neuroscience. And so it's really fun watching them love different aspects of science as well. And so it's been super fun.
Hopefully they'll follow in your footsteps. That could be dynasty.
More like my husband's. He works for industry. He's like a VP at Bayer, in crop science, but he did his postdoc at U of A too, in molecular biology. So less flexibility, but way more money.
Yeah. Right.
I think
We
less
chose
fun.
the more health related paths tend to not be, quite like that.
Yeah,
but
fine.
thank you so much.
Yeah, and just let me know if you have any questions. I'm always happy to answer them. I'm coming to Edmonton sometime because I'm gonna hang out with your perinatal death review committee.
Oh, wow.
Doesn't sound fun, but it's so fun to be
Yeah.
able to use data to save people's lives. That's my next mission.
Okay. Amazing. And
Okay,
I'll make sure that your email is included so that people can get in touch.
Perfect.
Thank
Now I want to
you.
know what you pick for your postdoc. So you're gonna have to let me know.
Okay.
We'll invest it. Okay. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.